Ko Rahui Kātani.
Thank you, Mr Speaker. Today is an auspicious day in which to be speaking to the second reading of the Aquaculture Legislation Amendment Bill No. 3. For while we are debating this bill today, which makes changes to the Aquaculture Reform, Repeals and Transitional Provisions Act 2004, the Fisheries Act 1996, the Māori Commercial Aquacultural Claims Settlement Act 2004 and the Resource Management Act 1991, over in New York in the United Nations headquarters, some 1,300 delegates are meeting to mark the 10th anniversary of the Permanent Forum on Indigenous Issues. And it is with considerable pride that I rise to this bill, mindful of the call of the Secretary-General, Ban Ki-moon, for participants to raise their voices so that the world can hear about the threats and risks that Indigenous communities face, as well as the unique expertise that they can bring to issues such as aquaculture. I stand here also proud that as a direct descendant of Ngāti Koata, Ngāti Toa, Ngāti Kuia and Ngāi Tahu, we have a government that is committed to upholding the 2004 Act, which provided for a full and final settlement of Māori commercial aquacultural interests since 21 September 1992. The Māori Commercial Aquaculture Claims Settlement Act 2004 was very important in terms of ensuring iwi access to coastal marine space to develop their marine farming interests. There are two particular sets of obligations to the settlement. The Act commits the Crown to providing the Māori Commercial Aquaculture Settlement Trust with the equivalent of 20% of existing aquaculture space in a coastal marine area issued on or after the 21st September 1992. And it requires 20% of all new aquaculture space identified in the coastal marine area to be transferred to iwi via the Māori Commercial Aquaculture Settlement Trust. The bill we are debating today enables the Crown settlement obligations to be delivered under the proposed new law. This can be done through the provision of either space in the coastal marine area or an agreed equivalent. So we are at a significant point in our journey. But how do we ensure that tangata whenua can indeed raise their voices as encouraged by the Secretary-General? The most distinctive feature of this work to date is the close engagement between the ministers and iwi to ensure that the integrity of the settlement will be maintained. The Crown and iwi leaders established a group of technical advisors to develop and consult on options for a new settlement delivery mechanism. The technical group has reported to ministers and iwi leaders, and I want to just point out a few more details about this innovative type of policy creation that has been a feature of the Māori Party's influence on government. The role of the Iwi Leaders Forum has been a vital one to get the door open and to establish some foundation principles so that hapu and whānau have a strong platform from which to launch their input. The Aquaculture Iwi Leadership Group has made it clear, as in fact has every Iwi Leaders Group during this term, they do not speak for or represent any other iwi apart from their own. But each and every one of the Iwi Leaders Forum are elected to their respective positions by their iwi. It's not for other outsiders to criticise those leaders. If there is criticism to be put, let it be from the people at home. The key thing, whether it be in New York or in Murihiku, is for Māori to be at the front end of each issue, and that is the assurance we have been able to provide through our position at the table of government. It is about being able to deliver. Delivery is far more, of course, than the kōrero that is had, as important as that is. It is about doing the mahi. In the case of this bill, working out mechanisms for delivering the Crown's obligations. And so the technical group was chosen to do just that, based on their expertise in aquaculture, resource management, policy development, local government processes, kaitiakitanga and iwi development. Because of this wide expertise, iwi leaders have been able to be quite innovative around the acquisition of space given the current restrictions. This is particularly important in terms of securing other space, such as deep-sea aquaculture, because that's where the industry and technology is heading. And so I want to acknowledge the Minister for working with the Māori Party and for inviting iwi to discuss precisely how the Crown can deliver its obligations under the Māori Commercial Aquaculture Claims Settlement for new space. Because what iwi and hapu have told us repeatedly over this last decade is that the Labour government rushed through the Māori Aquaculture Settlement Act 2004, which left a lot of loopholes, which left Māori vulnerable. The bill closes some of these loopholes, so it should be supported. The fundamental problem is that too few new players, including Māori, will be able to enter the aquaculture industry. There has been basically no existing space to allocate to Māori, and it is too difficult to get new space as the process is too difficult and bureaucratic. And so we needed to think creatively and long-term about how to ensure that marine-based aquaculture is able to fulfil its economic potential while also retaining existing protections to ensure that the integrity for the settlement for iwi is retained. What we also know is that iwi leaders have expressed a preference for space which has been captured in the settlement. There is no time to waste. As we understand, iwi and Ministry of Fisheries are currently doing forecasting research on new aquaculture spaces to be made available to iwi, space based on 20% of the aquaculture industry. As we also understand, space will be available regionally, so will require iwi to enter into regional arrangements amongst themselves. This will proceed over a 3-year period. Cash settlement will still be available instead of space if other iwi prefer that. These are all pragmatic, realistic steps to enacting the settlement by progressing an innovative and meaningful settlement mechanism. It reminds me again of the words of Ban Ki-moon, who told the New York gathering that the United Nations Declaration on the Rights of Indigenous Peoples finally had the consensus it deserves. Now we need to make the Declaration's principles a reality. One of the other concepts he talked about was the view that Indigenous peoples have been living in a green economy for centuries. Ban Ki-moon suggested that when economists today look for new ways to achieve sustainable development, they should look at the old practices in Indigenous communities. And so I cannot help but think, as we look face on at the growth of the aquaculture industry in Aotearoa, that we should look with renewed respect at the impact of iwi upon aquaculture. Perhaps we can all take a moment to learn from their example. Mr Speaker, we are happy to support this bill. We're pleased that the reform package aims to reduce costs, delays and uncertainty, encourage investment and ensure decisions on aquaculture fit within an integrated coastal management framework. And most of all, we are so happy that the legislation has benefited from consultation with and input from iwi, hapu and whānau.
Call Colin